Hi everyone, welcome to Chapter Book Storytime. I'm Ellen from EVPL Oakland, and on this week's edition of the Variety Pack, I have a book by an author you may be familiar with, but it's the start of a new series. It's called Dog Squad by Chris Grabenstein. You might know Mr. Grabenstein's name from his most popular series, which is the Mr. Lemoncello series, which starts out with Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library. It's another book about books, which you know I really like. And he's also collaborated with James Patterson on several series, such as Cat Loves Dog and the Jackie Ha-Ha series. And my favorite that he's written with Mr. Patterson is Potty Mouth and Stupid. I like that. It was a fun one, but it has a really good message too. But back to the new series, Dog Squad. Dog Squad is the title of a very popular television series starring real dogs having real adventures, fighting crime, catching spies, and rescuing puppies. The first couple of chapters give you an idea of what an episode is like. Let's take a look. Dog Squad, Chapter 1. Nala, the world's bravest and boldest border collie, bounded through the brambles. "The river just jumped its banks, Duke," she reported. "We need to herd it back to where it belongs."
"You can't herd water,"
said Scruffy, his wiry whiskers twitching.
"That's harder than herding cats."
"Well, we need to do something," said the steely-eyed Duke, "because the Wilkins farm is directly downstream."
"The Wilkins farm?"
shrieked Scruffy.
"Their new puppies will be swept away in the flood."
"Oh, no, they won't," said Duke. "Not on our watch," said the noble Nala. "When trouble calls," Duke arched his left eyebrow heroically, "it's Dog Squad to the rescue." Nala barked, Scruffy yapped, and Duke took off running. "Follow me," he shouted over his shoulder. The three dogs raced alongside the swollen river. The music was very dramatic with lots of dun-de-dun-dun-duns. It was the kind of music that made a chase scene even more exciting. "There," said Nala, focusing her laser-sharp eyes and pointing. "In the rapids, 6 puppies."
"I've heard of giving dogs a bath," cracked Scruffy, "but this is ridiculous."
"Dog Squad!" shouted a weeping mother on the far shore of the river. "Help! Save my children! They're in trouble!" "Don't worry, ma'am," boomed Duke over the roar of the raging rapids. "No harm shall befall your pups. Not today. We're the Dog Squad." He gazed toward the horizon. Wind tousled his fur just so. The sun glinted off his eyes. "And we're going in after them."
"We are?" said Scruffy. "Those rapids look pretty, rapid, Duke."
"That just means we'll get downstream faster." Duke leapt into the water. "Possum!" cried Nala as she jumped in behind Duke. Scruffy sighed.
"Oh, nothing's too rough for us."
And he sprang off the rocky riverbank and belly-flopped into the churning stream below. Grunting hard and flexing every muscle he had to flex, Duke fought his way to the middle of the white-capped water. Muddy waves crested, dragging along branches torn from trees upstream. "Help!" peeped an adorable puppy, bobbing up and down in the water. "Help!" "Hang on, son!" shouted Duke. "We're coming!"
"Duke!" cried Scruffy. "There's only 3 of us, but 6 of them. We can't possibly save them all."
"Oh, yes we can, Scruffy. We're the Dog Squad." "Saving puppies is what we do best," said Nala.
"But how?"
gurgled Scruffy, spitting out a mouthful of dirty water. Duke could see all 6 puppies. 3 were flailing, 2 were frantically treading water, and 1 was biting a stick like it was a chew toy. "Of course," said Duke. "Bite onto a couple of those branches, gang. I'll strip some bark off this log, we'll lash together a raft, and float those puppies home." Chapter 2. Like dogs all across America, Fred was glued to his human's TV, watching the newest episode of Dog Squad that had just started streaming that night. Fred loved the heart-racing, tail-wagging adventures of Scruffy, Nala, and their fearless leader, Duke. All the dogs in the show were voiced by human actors, of course, because even though dogs could talk amongst themselves, they still hadn't cracked the code for human speech. "Hop aboard, sport!" Duke called to the last puppy, still furiously paddling in the swirling water alongside the raft Fred's heroes had just lashed together.
My name's Rocco, not Sport,
the puppy snapped back. Fred laughed. On screen, Duke chuckled the way all heroes chuckle as he plucked Rocco out of the river. Then he gave the little guy an ear nuzzle that made the puppy giggle. "Aw," thought Fred. It was one of those cute aw moments that Dog Squad always did right after its action scenes. Fred loved the aw moments and the action scenes. He loved everything, the whole show. Fortunately, Fred's owner, Big Tony Bomboloni, wasn't home on most Thursday nights when fresh episodes came online. Big Tony wouldn't want to watch Dog Squad because, well, Big Tony really didn't like dogs. He only adopted Fred from the animal shelter because he thought that with enough harsh training, Fred could become a guard dog, the super aggressive kind that Big Tony could sell to the highest bidder. Big Tony was always trying to get rich quick. Just the other week, he bent all his refrigerator magnets and tried to sell them online as miracle medical bracelets to gullible senior citizens. Fred frowned just thinking about it. If Big Tony was on Dog Squad, the good guys would catch him, lock him up, and throw away the key. It was too bad that justice wasn't as swift or fair in real life as it was on Dog Squad. Truth was, Fred just wasn't cut out to be a guard dog. He wanted to be a part of a forever family, not a money-making scheme, a real family, like he'd almost had with Susan. Fred sighed. Whenever he thought of Susan, he remembered long walks in the park, cozy cuddle time on the couch, and a bowl that was always filled with kibble. Susan had loved Fred. She even gave him his name, wrote it on his collar in big, bold strokes. But then Susan fell in love with Mike, and Mike thought Fred was a mutt. He was. Mike didn't want to be seen walking a mutt in New York City's Central Park. If they were going to get married, Mike told Susan, Fred had to go. If Susan needed a dog, Mike said they would buy her a new one, a purebred, from a trainer he knew in Pennsylvania. Purebreds made much more fashionable canine companions. Susan agreed, because she was more in love with Mike than she had been with Fred. 3 weeks before their wedding, Susan took Fred to an animal shelter on East 110th Street, where she told a whole bunch of lies, including, "My fiancé is allergic to him." Fred blinked hard. Sometimes it was sad to think about Susan. "Duke!" shouted Nala on the TV. Her eyes narrowed. She was focused on something rising up behind the raft. Oh no, Fred saw it too, a towering wall of water. "The beaver dam upstream," said Nala, somehow keeping her cool the way she always did. "It must have burst. Here comes a tsunami. Cowabunga, everybody!" Duke scooped up all the puppies, tucked 3 under each arm, and stood on his hind legs to ride the rickety raft like a surfboard on the crest of a 30-foot wave. It was so cool. Fred wished he could do it too. He wished he could be like Duke. "When trouble calls," Fred said in his best Duke voice, "it's Dog Squad to the rescue." He leaped up on the ratty sofa in Big Tony's basement TV room as if it was a raging river. He pretended the cushions were puppies in need of rescuing. "Saving puppies is what we do best."
Nothing's too rough for us.
"We're pawsome." Fred plucked up the cushions one by one and tossed them to safety on the floor. He was rescuing a throw pillow, thrashing it back and forth to free it from a tangle of imaginary vines, when he heard the cellar steps creaking. He froze. Fred knew what those creaking steps meant. Big Tony had come back early. And when he finds Fred on the couch, he is furious. He grabs Fred by the collar, drags him up the stairs, and says, "You'll never be a guard dog. You're nothing but a good-for-nothing lazy mutt. Get out!" And he throws Fred out onto the streets to fend for himself. What's Fred going to do? Well, what happens next is a lot like a Dog Squad episode. We're going to jump ahead here to Chapter 3 a little bit. Here is Fred alone in an alley. The alley was quiet, except for the sound of Fred's paws slapping against very wet pavement. There was a street lamp up ahead. Its misty cone of light shone on a dumpster, There might be food in there, Fred realized. He heard the muffled clanking of dishes, sniffed the delicious odor of steak and meatloaf and, baked potatoes, because the dumpster was right behind a restaurant. He picked up his pace and trotted over to inspect the hulking treasure chest. His nose wiggled and widened, savoring the smells. An elderly dog, so skinny Fred could see its ribs, stepped into the light and pawed at the dumpster. Man, thought Fred, that old guy looks even hungrier than me. Suddenly, a tough, muscular bulldog with a spiked collar emerged from the darkness. The bulldog was growling. Chapter 4. Another mean-looking dog, a Doberman pinscher, slunk out of the shadows behind the bulldog. The Doberman's collar was spiky too.
What you doing, Grandpa?
The bulldog grumbled.
Well, replied the old-timer, his voice shaking, I was hoping maybe to find something to eat inside the dumpster. You see, I've fallen apart upon hard times and...
Boo-hoo, sneered the bulldog.
Yeah, booty hooty hoo, snickered the Doberman. Get away from the buffet, Grandpa, commanded the bulldog. This is our alley and our dumpster.
He wasn't... Fred was still hidden by the shadows, but he crawled forward, inching closer to the dumpster. He wasn't sure why, he just did it.
Oh, come on, friends, begged the old dog. Surely there's enough scraps inside for all of us. Ah, quit your whining, barked the bulldog. My name is Dozer, see, and I ain't your friend. The only dog I'm sharing my dinner with is my pal here, Petunia. Do not make me rip out your fur, old man, snarled Petunia, because you ain't got much fur left.
Fred had never been brave. In fact, he was pretty much a coward. But for some reason, Dozer and Petunia reminded him of Mike and Big Tony. They were all bullies, and bullies were only interested in what they wanted, not who they might be hurting. Fred was tempted to sneak away and hide, but he couldn't let the two mean dogs rough up a weak old stray who looked like he might not even have any teeth. So Fred rose up out of his crawl and stepped into the dim light cast by the street lamp. You guys? Fred was so terrified he wondered if the bulldog and the Doberman could hear his heart thumping inside his chest. Yep, this had been a really bad, terrible, no good idea.
What the what? Gasped Dozer. It's that dog, Duke.
Huh? Said Fred.
Duke! Shrieked the Doberman. From Dog Squad. I knew they'd nab us one day.
Fred glanced down at the puddle and studied his reflection. Okay, there was a resemblance. He didn't have the same heroic glint in his eye, and his fur didn't ruffle as majestically in the breeze, but he did look a little bit like Duke, especially in the murky light of an otherwise dark alley.
Cheese it, Petunia!
Cried Dozer. The dogs took off. Fred laughed a nervous laugh. Oh, I'm not Duke, But they were long gone.
Thank you, young fellow, wheezed the old dog. You were very brave.
Me? Not really. I actually was kind of scared. Did you see the fangs on that Doberman?
I certainly did. But true courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. True courage means you're scared, but you go ahead and do what needs to be done anyway.
Fred helped the old dog forage for food in the dumpster. Mission accomplished. He found a few scraps for himself, too. It was food. Sort of. But it was also disgusting. Suddenly, a rattling truck crunched up the alleyway.
Uh-oh, said the old dog. Now we better cheese it. That's animal control.
Well, Fred's not fast enough or streetwise enough, and he gets caught by animal control. And he's taken to a shelter where his luck begins to change. In the shelter, he makes a friend, Chico, the Chihuahua, and both are adopted right away by a lady who says they might be on Broadway. The woman who wants to adopt them is Jenny Yen. Jenny Yen has done it all. Her niece Abby is awfully cute too. Abby thinks she's a pet psychic. We work with Jenny and Abby all the time. They love training strays because, come on guys, you guys are the best, am I right? So Fred and Chico are whisked away to New York City, where they meet a lot of other dogs who are going to be part of the show. And they are in the show and they have a great time. They're treated like kings. They get all the best food, they stay in an apartment while they're there. But when the show is over, Fred begins to worry. I don't know. Maybe they'll send me back to the shelter. What? No way. Once Jenny Yen rescues you, you stay rescued. Really? Really. As long as she can afford to keep her Second Chance Ranch running, you'll always have a home. A wave of relief washed over Fred. Possum. Careful. That's Nala's catchphrase. Right, my bad. I have to go thank Jenny. Fred bounded down the staircase and padded into the kitchen. Jenny was on her phone. She didn't look happy. Duke broke his leg, she said to whomever she was talking to. How bad is the fracture? Abby was sitting on a stool. She looked miserable too, but when she saw Fred, her eyes lit up like she was having an idea. Or maybe she'd just seen the box of donuts on the counter near the sink. Fred couldn't tell. How long will it take for the leg to heal? Jenny asked. 2 weeks? We have a big grand opening of Pet World tomorrow. They booked Duke to cut the ribbon. And Jenny? Said Abby. Hang on, hun, said Jenny, covering the phone with her hand. Duke did something stupid. He'll be in a cast for 2 weeks. Jenny's phone thrummed. She looked at the screen. Dr. Appleman, she said to the phone, I'm going to have to call you back. The dog squad people are beeping in. She poked the screen. Hey. Fred heard a man screaming through the speaker. It was hard to understand, but Fred could tell the man was not happy. Yes, said Jenny, I know it's a grand opening, but we need to postpone. No, we don't, said Abby. Jenny covered the phone again. Abby, honey, this is serious. Duke could still do the Pet World promotion tomorrow. Can you hang on for just 1 sec, Jenny said to the phone. I need to take this other call. Jenny pressed mute. Abby, Duke is injured. Dr. Appleman says he can barely hobble out of his doghouse. So it's a good thing we have Fred. Abby was so excited she sprang off her stool and bounced up on the balls of her feet. Fred looks enough like Duke to fill in for him. He's even got the lightning bolt of white fur on his head. Jenny didn't say a word. She looked at Abby. She looked at Fred. She looked back at Abby. Abby nodded. It'll work, Aunt Jenny. I know it will. Finally, after a really deep breath, Jenny unmuted her phone. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said. Don't cancel the pet store event. We're good to go. The next day, Jenny and Abby take Fred to the Second Chance Ranch for a chance to meet Duke and his co-stars, Nala and Scruffy. You can imagine how Fred feels. He's just a little anxious meeting his hero. Duke was the dog of dogs, the king of canines. No one could ever pretend to be half as heroic as Duke was. Relax, said Abby, picking up on Fred's anxiety. It'll be easy. Go inside, spend a little time with Duke, get to know Nala and Scruffy too. They're in there visiting. Fred did his best to wag his tail cheerfully. On one paw, the idea of pretending to be Duke, the most courageous dog on television, terrified him. On the other, knowing he was about to meet his favorite action heroes, Duke, Nala, and Scruffy, also terrified him. He cautiously crept up to the porch and, after pausing to take in a deep, fortifying, leg-steadying breath, shimmied through Duke's doggy door. Hey, look, Duke, said the wiry terrier Fred immediately recognized as Scruffy. It's you! Scruffy, of course, was the scrappy, funny one. Fred smiled, remembering the time Scruffy saved a cat stuck in a toilet bowl and then accidentally flushed himself into a swirly-whirly. Nala was right next to Scruffy. Fred loved Nala. She was so wise, so athletic. If dogs were ever in the Olympics, Nala would be the captain of every dog team. Who could ever forget her amazingly gymnastic tumble through zero gravity on her spacewalk in that episode about the space station? It's like we're looking in a mirror, she said, shooting Fred a wink. Duke himself was sitting in a very cushy, very regal dog bed, his right front leg wrapped in a plaster cast. Fred could not believe where his life had taken him. This was the moment he was waiting for. He was in the presence of Duke. He was about to express his gratitude for all Duke had done and meant, all the lessons he had taught. But Duke spoke first. If you were looking in a mirror, Duke snapped at Nala. "You'd see yourself, not me. And why'd you bring me flowers?" he grumbled to Scruffy.
"Oh, we figured you'd need something to smell," said Scruffy, "with what you're being cooped up inside and all."
"You figured wrong, dumbbell. You know what happens to dumbbell's sidekicks?"
"No, Duke," said Scruffy. "What?"
"They get kicked to the side. You're both replaceable. Remember that."
"Oh, I will, boss," said Scruffy. "I will. Gonna make a mental note."
While Scruffy babbled, Nala gave Fred a look and an eye roll. Suddenly, Duke, the hero Fred had admired his whole life, turned his full attention to Fred. His eyes were cold. Fred was in shock, because so far the real-life Duke was nothing like the noble and heroic one Fred knew from TV. In fact, the two Dukes couldn't have been more different. "So," said Duke with a dismissive snicker, "I think Jenny Yen thinks you look like me." Fred nodded and gave an awkward smile. "I don't see the resemblance," said Duke. "You're a stray, straight from the shelter. Me, I'm the most heroic dog in the world." Fred was stunned speechless. "Can you speak?" asked Duke. Fred didn't know what to do, so he barked. "Ha!" laughed Duke. "The fool barked. Like when humans say speak. Now that's comedy. Funnier than anything you've ever done, Scruffy." Scruffy's whiskers twitched. Fred could tell. That insult stung. Nala moved closer to Scruffy and struck a protective pose. "Listen up, you mutts," snarled Duke. "Jenny's dumb idea of having this nobody doubling for me is only temporary. Fine, he can pretend to be me at the pet store opening. I don't care about pet store openings. I don't really do pet store openings anymore."
"We just did one last week,"
mumbled Scruffy. "Scruffy, when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you." Duke returned his focus to Fred. "Listen, and listen good, whatever your name is." It's Fred, sir." "So, I don't need to know your name because we're never going to converse again. Got it?" Fred's body and spirit drooped. This was not how he pictured this conversation going. Not at all. "Yes, sir," he whispered it. "Tomorrow, at the pet store, you don't bark, you don't shake paws, and you definitely don't do any of my signature moves. You just stand there looking like me for a few minutes and tear down the ribbon when Jenny tells you. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." "Now, scram. All of you. I'm healing here, and take your lousy flowers with you." Scruffy snatched the limp flowers off the floor. "Come on, kid," said Nala, gently nudging Fred toward the door with her snout. Fred felt like he might burst into tears. Duke had been his hero, his idol. On TV, anyway. In real life, he was a lot closer to Big Tony. When they were about 10 feet away from Duke's front porch, Scruffy spat out the flowers he was carrying in his mouth. Pah! Then he lowered his voice and gave Fred a little advice. Don't let Duke get under your fur, kid." "He's rude and nasty to everyone," added Nala. He doesn't get easier. We just have to get stronger." "But he's Duke. He's the most heroic dog in the world."
"Yep," said Scruffy, "and he's also the most obnoxious dog in the world."
Well, that didn't go very well, did it? It turns out that Duke is nothing like the hero he plays on television. But Fred is still a little bit worried. Can he be a hero on TV? Can he live up to everyone's expectations? Can he do a good job? Well, from what you know about him already, you know the answer is yes. He's a great actor. He portrays a hero well, both on and off the screen. But Duke is jealous, and he's out to sabotage Fred's career before it really gets off the ground. And just when Fred is living the wonderful life and is thinking that he just might get his forever home, up pops Tony Bomboloni. He wants his dog back. To find out what happens, read Dog Squad. When Trouble Calls, It's Dog Squad to the Rescue by Chris Grabenstein. This is available in print at EVPL. Thanks for joining me today on Chapter Book Storytime, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.